Words are just a human invention, and language is something outside of Hebrew, which was spoken even before creation was. Every other language is something that evolved over time. But Adonai, I ask you at this time, even in the weakness of using a human language like English, which is just a putting together of sounds that you've enabled our tongues and mouths to push forward, Father, I ask you, Adonai, to move in that, to move in these words, Adonai, and to penetrate hearts, Father, where you need to penetrate with these words. Some guy, some long time ago, decided that the English word "the" is going to be a word. So he kind of took his tongue and he put it to his teeth and he went... And then somebody asked him a question, he went, oh. And then at that point he kind of put it together, and it evolved to a word, the. Did Adonai enable that to happen? I don't know, but Adonai, I ask you every time the word the is spoken today, that your Spirit can speak far beyond what that word is. And your Spirit can resonate, your Spirit can speak to deep places, because you say deep calls unto deep. So Adonai, we don't ask for a surface level word. We ask for a deep word. Adonai. Not that we want to hear in the natural. We don't want to get pats on the back. We don't want to get a little pat on the butt. We don't want to hear what makes us comfortable, and we don't want to hear what makes us nod our heads. Yep, that's right. Yep, yep. Because where is there growth in hearing things that we're only comfortable with? Where is there stretching unless we hear things that we don't necessarily agree with? So, Father, I ask you, Adonai, to penetrate every place that needs penetration. Even me. In Yeshua's name. So today, I'm going to speak in a way that I have yet to speak as a rabbi here, and that is with the help of PowerPoint. The first day that I came here on the first Shabbat as rabbi, I did bring a piece of paper. I tried to memorize it as best I could. And I was nervous, and even to the point of going up and giving the sermon, I'm like looking at you, how am I going to remember that? How am I going to remember that? How am I going to remember that? For those who can't listen to fast talk, how can I remember that? That was the last time I brought a piece of paper to Mishkahn. Until today, when I have PowerPoint. And normally I'm giving a sermon. I don't know what the difference is between a sermon and a word and a teaching. I don't know if there is a difference. But normally I would, kind of dig through the Torah portion, and something will speak to my heart, and it'll kind of intersect with something that Adonai is speaking to me about already, or something that's going on in the world, or in my life, or in somebody else's life, and it'll kind of gel together, and here I come and with a message, and I bring it forth without any paper. But today I got the PowerPoint. And it's going to be a little bit more of what I would consider a teaching, a little bit more of a Bible study, because I feel there is something very important in the Scripture that we as a Messianic Jewish community need to know and need to understand. The Messianic Jewish community of today is the first time in 2,000 years that Jewish people and Gentiles, non-Jewish people, are coming together to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So with that, there are discussions and dissensions and disagreements and conversations that happen in a Messianic Jewish community that hasn't happened in 2,000 years. The last time that Jew and Gentile came together. Before this little rift happened and Christianity evolved into a separate religion with its separate traditions. I learned last week downstairs in the kids' room that Catholicism changed the Ten Commandments. I never knew that. That the second commandment of don't make idols or don't make carved images was actually removed. And then everything was kind of shifted up one. So then they had a gap in number 10, so they took number 9 and they split it into 2. Everybody? How many people knew that? I didn't know that. Until last week. It's pretty crazy. So, with all of that, there's been a separation because Jewish people rightly said, that's not kosher. Unclean. No thank you. You can keep your Jesus, and I'll keep my Moses. But that wasn't the intention of the writers of the New Testament. But it was the intention of Adonai in that he's orchestrating an incredible story. And we must realize that things that happen in the world, we're like, it shouldn't have happened that way. That was against the Lord. It is not against the Lord because the Lord is orchestrating everything. So, over 2,000 years, the religious systems of Christianity and the religious systems of Judaism never intersected until this age with Messianic Judaism, when Jew and Gentile again come together. And then the arguments that we see in the New Testament are once again coming to the forefront. And we're going to go through that a little bit, because I believe it is important for a Messianic community like Mishkahn David is to understand what some of the things are saying here in the Scriptures. We are going to go through the book of Galatians. So a little bit, that's Paul, by the way. Somebody took that picture 2,000 years ago. He wasn't wearing his kippah. His hairstyle was kind of like mine, except for the beard. So a little bit of geographical background. This is just some background information. This is modern day map. You know, you got Israel down here underneath my head. I thought that was funny. You got Turkey and Greece. So that's modern day Israel and a modern day map. But when Rabbi Shaul, went on his missionary journeys, he started in Jerusalem under my head and kind of went around that area. So we see here, even though this is what the map looks like today, you know, we got Ephesus over here, you know, we got Thessalonica over there, you know, we got Corinth, where Corinthians he wrote to over here, Philippi, and there's Galatia in the middle of modern day Turkey. So that's where the Church of Galatia is, and those were the recipients of the book of Galatians. Pretty simple. And I did this only for myself and not for anybody else. Anybody know what this is? Nope. It's the Isle of Rhodes. Anybody know what American state was named after that?
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, when the explorer Verrazano, as in the bridge, came to this area and he saw Block Island. And he said, that looks like the island of Rhodes. And that's what he was referring to. That's where Rhode Island gets his name. All right, end of sermon. You may go home. No, so anyways, there's a little background information. Paul, as we know, whose name was Shaul, he was a Jewish rabbi, very, very schooled in Judaism. He was a Pharisee. He was very, very much up there. If he did not accept the Lord Yeshua and become kind of a heretic to Judaism, guaranteed he'd be listed in the Talmud and all the Jewish writings. Hi. so he went on journeys. You know, he was part of the stoning of Stephen. We know that. Then he had his encounter with Yeshua, where he was knocked off his horse and he went blind. After that, he took 3 years and he kind of just went away. He didn't speak to nobody. He just kind of just went by himself for 3 years, and then he went to Jerusalem and he met for the first time Peter and James and said, "Hey, this is the revelation I'm getting. What do you think, guys? You're the leaders. You tell me if I'm kind of off here." He then went on his first missionary journey up that map, came back to Jerusalem, went on his second missionary journey, went on a third, back to Jerusalem, went to Rome. He was imprisoned in Rome, and then it even says in the book of Romans that he had a desire to actually go to Spain. We don't know if he actually did. We don't exactly know when all these churches were founded. We don't exactly know when he wrote all his letters. You can kind of theorize. I believe that the founding of the Galatian church was in his first missionary journey. And the writing of the book of Galatians was in the second missionary journey. The reason being, in the book of Galatians, which is when the church already existed, he speaks about his experience here. So the church must have existed before this, because he spoke about this experience in his book. So this happened, and that led him to write the book of Galatians. A little bit more background. Galatians is an incredibly Jewish book. It is an incredibly misunderstood book. In fact, the whole New Testament is an incredibly Jewish book. And the New Testament is an incredibly misunderstood book. Because it is not viewed as a Jewish book. So much of the New Testament is centered around Torah. The amount of conversation in the New Testament about Torah, keeping Torah, what does it mean for a Jewish believer? What does it mean for a not Jewish believer? Was so prevalent in the New Testament, it deserves a place on rabbis' shelves. It is such a Jewish, Torah-centered book. But for about 2,000 years, when the church split off and said, we are not part of this Jewish thing, and made their own thing, they neglected and translated in their minds what it meant, which is that Judaism and Torah ended, when that's not what the writer's intention was. But we need to go through it because it's incredibly important to know what was written and what is meant. So, obedience to Torah, what it means for Jews, what it means for Gentiles, so much debate around this topic. The book of Galatians is the centerpiece of this whole conversation. Okay? It's all about Torah. Or as my Eastern European ancestors say, Torah. So we're going to get a little bit into it here. So addressing the issue, Galatians 1, Paul says his greetings and salutations, yada yada, hey, I'm Paul, I'm writing this letter with my own hand, stuff like that. Immediately gets into the issue. What is the issue? I am amazed that you were so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Messiah for a different gospel, which isn't really another gospel, because there's only one gospel, that's what he's saying. You're abandoning it for something different, a different gospel, but it's not really a different gospel, is what he's saying. But there are some that are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel. Okay, so some people came in and are teaching the Galatians something different than what Paul taught them, right? And he needs to address it. So he goes into a little bit of a recap of his history and his credibility. He goes into his advancement in Judaism. That he was advancing far beyond his peers. His zealousness, he goes into his zealousness for Judaism, for the laws, for the traditions, how he has a love for all these things. And he goes through, again, his journeys, which we went through. He received the gospel, he recounts his travels, he goes back into Jerusalem, and he starts to speak about what happened in Jerusalem. Okay? So if we go back, remember, he had a missionary journey, and then he went back to Jerusalem. What happened in Jerusalem? Hang in there. This is really important. The Jerusalem Council is what happened. Everybody knows the Jerusalem Council. So he goes on his missionary journey, he comes back to Jerusalem, and then this happened. So what is the Jerusalem Council? Some folks said the following. Some men came down from Judea and began teaching the brethren, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. Okay? So some people came in, Jewish people, came in and said, and saw the Gentiles that were receiving Messiah and being adopted into Israel, and they're saying, no, that's all cool and everything, but you got to get circumcised. The men got to get circumcised. They got to come into this whole thing. Okay? And believe me, what they meant is that the Gentiles, they have to keep the Torah to be saved. That is what is meant by these people that said you have to be circumcised. So there was great debate and there's dissension discussing these things. This has not been discussed for 2,000 years until today in the modern Messianic movement, where these kind of conversations and these types of discussions are once again happening. What about the Gentiles? What do they have to do? Do they have to keep the whole of the Torah or not? It's the same conversation. Different millennium, same conversation. It was a hot topic of the early Messianic community, and it's the same debate occurred with Peter and his experience with Cornelius. Are we familiar with that one? So I don't care if you're familiar, we're still going to backtrack because I wrote the PowerPoint, I can't stop it. Peter and Cornelius. Peter was praying and he saw a vision of unkosher animals. It came down on a sheet, and it says that it came down on the four corners. Sometimes I believe that because it mentions the four corners in the sheet, perhaps it was a talit, because you have the tassels on the four corners. But these unkosher animals came down on a sheet, and a heavenly voice said, Peter, kill these things and eat them. And Peter, did he say, well, Jesus did away with the law, no problem. He didn't say that. He said, no, I've never eaten anything unholy or unclean. There's a verse in the Gospels where Yeshua says, thus Yeshua declared all things clean. Right? And the church used that to say, okay, everything, he declared that what was unkosher as far as animals, that's gone. He nailed that to the cross, it's gone. If that's what Yeshua meant, Peter would have eaten. Because Peter walked with Yeshua when he said that. So this is after Yeshua was executed, was raised and left, and it was years later, I think it was like 20 years later, he's saying, no, I've never eaten anything unholy or unclean. Still saying it. But then things get clarified what the vision actually meant. Peter visits with Cornelius, who was a Gentile, who did eat all this kind of stuff, and Peter said, God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean, using the same terms that he used when he answered the angel. People do that at work all the time. They're doing PowerPoint and they point with their shadow. I love it. So does everybody understand that? It wasn't a new law saying that these things are now clean to eat or kosher to eat. It had nothing to do with that. It was a revelation that those that were considered people, that were considered unclean by Jews like Peter, are now being considered clean. That was the revelation. So Peter preaches Yeshua to Cornelius. Cornelius receives Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and is immersed. And then here it comes again. Here comes the accusations. Here comes the debate again. You ate with uncircumcised men. Here come the Jewish people saying, oh, no, what you did is not cool. What you did isn't kosher. So the debate happened even with him. And Peter explains, therefore, if I gave to them the same gift that God gave to us, also after believing in the Lord Yeshua, who is I that I can stand in God's way? So this Cornelius, he received Ruach just from his faith, from his belief in the one that died for his sins. And then the Jewish people said, no, that's not enough, no way. And Peter's like, look, I can't stop this. I can't stop the giving of the Holy Spirit. It ain't my problem that he's eating lobster and I don't. The ruach came on him. What am I going to do about it? Take it away? It's not mine to give, it's not mine to take away. God did this. So, that attitude was prevalent back then. So back to the Jerusalem Council. When they arrived at Jerusalem, they were received by the community. Listen to this. But some of the sect of the Pharisees. Pharisees are translated always as bad in the church, like hypocritical Jews. Right? Another mistranslation in the church. But some of the sect of the Pharisees who believed. These are Pharisees that accepted Yeshua. Yes, there was such a thing. Believe it or not. But they said, and they brought up a good case. It was worthy of discussion. They said, it's necessary to circumcise them. Oh, they believe in God now. They're part of us now. We got to circumcise them. And direct them to obey the law of Moses. How many of us have heard that argument in today's Messianic movement about non-Jewish believers? Now you got to start keeping the law of Moses. You have to. It's part of what you're being grafted into. You got to do it. How many people have heard that? It's a debate that's happening in Messianic Judaism this day. It's the first time that this is being debated again for 2,000 years. And it's very important to know what the answer is to this. The Bible is clear. Paul, this orthodox of orthodox rabbis, made it real clear. And we gotta say it. It must be known. It's critical. So they're talking about it. They're debating the yeses and the nos about this. Peter makes his stance. He said, why do you put God to the test by placing on the neck of the disciples a yoke which neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? By the way, they're talking about not just Torah itself. He's talking about Torah with all the Jewish traditions that are around it. That was the yoke that he was unable to bear. What wasn't Torah itself. But we believe that we're saved through grace by the Lord Yeshua the same way as they are also. So, James, Yaakov, who was the leader of the Jerusalem Council, right? He was the leader of the church in Jerusalem, so he was the decision maker in this debate. All the debates happening, the disagreements, the agreements, the yeses, the nos, the canes and the lows. And James was the final decision maker. And he said, was his decision, another Orthodox Jew, strong believer and follower in Torah, said, do not trouble those who are turning to God from the Gentiles. Write to them that they must abstain from things sacrificed to idols, from fornication, from things strangled, and from blood. For Moses is read in the synagogues on every Shabbat. In other words, they'll hear Moses anyway, because they didn't set up a separate religion of Christianity. It was part of Judaism. So they'll hear it. They'll hear Moses. When they attend synagogue, they'll hear it. But we don't need to shove Torah observance down the throat of people that are just coming to faith in God. Do you understand that? This is what he was saying. It's so important today to understand that. The same thing is true today. It is critical to understand that. These are the Jewish mandates of Gentiles even today. Let me speak about that. So James brought up these four things, okay, which by the way are not followed by the church. It pertains to, these are the things that Jewish people need to feel that a Gentile is living a righteous life. These days they are called the laws of Noah, Noahide laws. Okay, you can research that all you want. These are laws that Jewish people in tradition believe that apply to all of humanity, not just Jews, because it was from Moses, from Noah. Okay? So he asked a Jew, what does a Gentile have to do to be a righteous Gentile? They'll say these laws of Noah. Okay? And what are they? These are them, the 7. Now, they're not exactly what James wrote, okay? But they are incredibly related. Okay? Because these things, Jewish traditions evolve over time. So, these were from James, but now in the Talmud, which was written down, this is what it is now, the Noahide laws, but there's an incredible similarity between what a Jewish person today would say to a Gentile, this is what you got to do to just kind of hang with us, so we don't consider you just totally heathen. Right? These are the same things that James said to these new believers, that do this so you can have fellowship with Jewish people. Again, for 2,000 years, fellowship with Jewish people was cut because Christianity was turned into a separate religion. But that was not the intent of James. There was always to be fellowship in synagogues with Jewish people, and that is why the things that he listed is about what Gentiles have to do. Not the whole Torah, but these few things. It's what Jewish people need to say, okay, you're kosher, I'll listen to you. Okay? So, don't misunderstand what we're saying here. The New Testament is very pro-Torah. Very pro-Torah. Paul kept the Torah his entire life. It was after, I think, his third missionary journey where he's keeping a vow. There's one place on a missionary journey where he's keeping a fast. The disciples kept it. Yeshua kept it. Paul never taught Jews to not keep it. He never taught Jews to not keep it. In fact, there's one place in the book of Acts, in Acts 21, where he was accused of that. And his co-apostles were saying, Paul, you're being accused of teaching our people not to keep Torah. But we know that's not true, so please just do this so you can show them that you keep Torah and you're not teaching Jewish people to stay away from it, to abandon Torah, to abandon the traditions. But he did teach Gentiles coming into the faith do not have to keep the Torah. All of it. They accepted Messiah. Messiah gave them the Ruach HaKodesh. What else? Paul circumcised Timothy. He taught the churches to keep Passover. There's one place in Corinthians, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. He passionately taught the moral obligations of Torah. Relentlessly taught holiness according to Torah. Sexual purity. Against idolatry, against homosexuality, against lying and cheating and robbing and murder. All the things, the righteous requirements, the moral requirements of Torah, he was relentless to teach. But the ritualistic aspects of Torah, there's not a single place in the New Testament that he said, you got to teach these things. And this is one verse that I love to show how pro-Torah and Jewish the New Testament is. You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who believe that they are all zealous for Torah. Okay? So because he's teaching the Gentiles, saying, no, you don't have to do this. It's not against Torah. It does not push Torah away. It raises and elevates Torah. So a full Torah for a new Gentile believer